So first and foremost, before we go too far, obviously a huge thank you to our corporate partners and our partners who hopefully are well known and well versed now amongst all of our the people tuning in. So we've got BASF, BMS, CAPS, Copart, Emacs, Integral, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Mercer, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, S&G Response, and Sherwin-Williams Automotive Finishes, as well as our partners Aztec, the Green Part Specialists in DARSA, Prasco, and the Innovation Group. As always, our disclaimer before we go too far: the views and opinions expressed during the following webinar are those of the individual contributors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the contributor's employer, organisation, committee, or other group or individual. Please respect any all contributions, and we encourage you to join the conversation via the interactive functions available. And here is our fine lineup for today. So we've got Peter Edgar, Head of Motor Claims Operations, RSA. We've got Gary de Groot, Business Development Director at Innovation Group. And we've got Ian Pugh, Managing Director of Fix Auto UK. Welcome, welcome. Hope everyone's well, and we'll just do our little whistle-stop tour around each of you. So if you can just give us a very brief introduction, and all we're going to do is kind of a very quick one-liner. How's the start of the new year been for you? Without stating too much of the obvious, we hope. So Ian, how goes it?
Apart from COVID-19, I'm really good. So Ian Pugh, I head up Fix Auto UK, and up until this weekend I was fine. But unfortunately tested positive for COVID-19, so I'm got a bit of man flu going on and a lack of taste or sense of smell. But otherwise, all good.
Good stuff. Good to hear. And Peter.
Afternoon, everybody. Happy New Year. Yeah, getting back into swing of things. Had a nice break over Christmas. Had a bit of snow on Christmas Day in Manchester, so that was very pleasant. We've got the odd snowball fight in, so it was all good, but back in the swing of things now.
And I like the way you said earlier, the dads went out and ruined it. It was nice and peaceful up until you got joined in. So there you go. And Gary, welcome back.
Well, hiya Mark. Yeah, Gary de Groot, Business Development Director at Innovation Group. Happy New Year all. No COVID or snow where I've been at all, so been a pretty boring Christmas in all honesty. And yeah, new year, new challenges, right?
Absolutely, that I think so. So new beginnings was the theme of today's webinar, and it's fair to say we use that theme because of the new year, but we're in kind of, if we like, familiar territory, I suppose, now in terms of lockdowns. Things are changing by the minute. What, half an hour ago, restrictions were tightened in Scotland, so we'll kind of look at that a little bit more in depth, not today, but over the period of the next hour or so, and we'll get the information posted up. But a lot's happened, as I said, since December. We had the festive period, we had Brexit, which going into the break, we thought was going to be a no deal. A deal got done at the 11th hour, and then obviously the changes that have occurred regarding the restrictions. So we're just going to share some information and insight with you first and foremost. So the data we pulled today, so CAPS Claims Analysis Report for the month end December 2020, and this was circulated last week. So reporting 66% unique claims, so a slight dip on November, and obviously that was November to December was essentially the lockdown 2. And also obviously a very slight reduction in claims supply chain transmission. So, you know, it held relatively steady. What we're experiencing now or starting to feel is obviously the impact of lockdown 3 as we go into the new year. Apple Mobility Trends Report pulled this off this morning, this data. So driving, a reduction of 35%. This is across the UK. So you can see the different lines there. The red's driving, the orange is the walking, and the purple is the public transport. So we can see the impacts taking effect now. Google COVID-19 Community Mobility Report, and again this just reports on essentially travel to the various places, retail and recreation, public transport, workplaces. There's far more detail on the Google website, but this is pulled for Greater London, minus 72%, minus 71%, and minus 61%. Again, this is for week ending last week. Greater Manchester, again, just putting these two examples, there's an awful lot more on there. Minus 62%, minus 67% to public transport, and minus 47% to workplaces. And then we've got the TomTom live traffic data. Pulled this for this morning for London. You can see the three lines there. The red line is the live congestion. The dotted line is the average congestion in 2019, and the solid line being the average congestion in 2020. So obviously mirroring, if you like, but the volumes are clearly down year on year. And then also Birmingham, and slightly different. You can see this one. Happy to share these slides with anyone if you want to take a closer look, or again, visit the TomTom data. But you can see this is tracking slightly differently, where we've got more peaks and troughs and rush hours, and actually a lot closer to the average congestion in 2020. So let's catch up then on everything. We're going to run the first poll, get stuck into that straight away. So we're looking at the festive period, so looking retrospectively, and here we go. So how did volumes during the 2020 festive period, month of December, compare to the same period in 2019? All these votes come in anonymously, by the way, so was it 100% plus, was it 80 to 100%, was it 60 to 80%, 40 to 60, or lower than that? So just give us an idea, an indicator. There's no right or wrong answers. It is what it is, and I think we'll all agree we're getting vastly different information from across the sector, hugely varied in what's going on out there, how it's impacting on individuals and individual businesses. So we'll just give a little bit more time for the responses to come in. Okay. And the polling there, let's share those results. 60 to 80%, the majority 44%. Next up 40 to 60%, voted for by 29%, and 80 to 100%, 17%. So, okay, there we are. We've got a little snapshot there of how the festive period was. And if we go into the next poll, so lockdown 3, have you experienced a change in claims volume since the start of January? In essence, lockdown 3. So significant increase, a slight increase, remain static, slight decrease, or significant decrease. And again, we've posed this question during the latter half of the year. So we're kind of tracking all this sentiment on a bi-weekly basis. Plenty of information stemming from this. And again, just 10 seconds or so to cast those votes, and we'll see where we are. All right. So slight decrease, 49% of the audience, significant decrease, 29%. Remain static, 13%. And again, on the upside, 6% slight increase, 3% significant increase. Okay, well, let's come round, and Ian, I'll come to you if I may first. And so how would you sum up, from your perspective, tail end of 2020, the start of 21, and how did it compare with previous years?
I think, I mean, 2020 was obviously one of the most challenging years that I've had in my career at Fix Auto in the past 10 years. I think if we look back to last March, I was forecasting a claims volume in October of about 70% against normal, and I think I was pretty much an isolated, lonely torch on my own. So we obviously saw that as an industry, the industry lockdowns. So I think, from my perspective, it was a challenging year. I think we did a lot of work to control our costs and to secure government grants and funding, which was helping not only just our body shops, but the industry as well to generate improved cash flow and support. But I think it was, predicting 2 or 3 lockdowns, we would have said last March on this webinar would have been crazy, but that was the reality. So I think looking forward now into 2021, I mean, we've only just recently start to seeing the drop off in claims volumes. So looking at that survey, I agree totally with that, in that as a body shop group, your notifications won't have started to tail off, but we saw it yesterday was the first time. We saw a 20% drop off yesterday against normal levels. So I think as a body shop industry, you'll see that we get the first indicator at FNOL, but then you'll start to see that in, notifications going into the shops within about, a week to 10 days. So at the moment, if this trend continues, we were running at 4% behind normal up until yesterday, and it dropped to 20. If that 20 continues, then I think as an industry, then we've got to start looking at what February and March holds for us in terms of work volumes, because once the guys have hoovered up all their WIP, which, to be fair, we all carried a lot of WIP over from December into January. And I think, that can also, again, be a false indicator in terms of what's the notifications are looking like. But it was, a tough 2020 was tough for everybody, tough trading conditions. But I think as the Fix Auto group, we worked together and try to make the best of it and equally share what we had with the industry. And again, I'd echo that today as well, that going into 2021, whatever we find we can do to support the industry, we will. Because I think that's, again, it's, this problem's not over, for this year either, I don't think. So I think we're going to kind of zigzag our way through this. And, we wouldn't have planned 3 lockdowns last year. So, the likelihood is we should be, a bit more cautious and pessimistic on what our outlook looks like, going forward. But it is tough trading conditions. The industry is running at about 70%, I think, according to the CAPS data. But I think if this 20% that we've seen recently continues as a trend, then I can see the industry dropping down to about 50%. And that personally, that not as Fix Auto, but as an individual, that worries me, because, body shop repair is a critical mass industry, and it needs critical mass to sustain itself. And running at 50% is not sustainable. And that's my only real concern, if the government also don't support extending the furlough program beyond the end of sort of March, April time.
Yeah, absolutely right. And Peter, from an insurer's perspective, how kind of did the year end 2020, and how has it started for 21, and what are you kind of starting to see now? Does it echo Ian's sentiments in terms of volumes?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And yeah, I mean, totally echoes Ian's sentiments. I mean, I think that the end of the year was fairly quiet. I think a lot of people had backed up some holidays, so a lot of certainly the senior execs at RSA were on holiday for that last week, which takes a little bit of pressure off. You don't get as many emails coming through. So I think, generally speaking, people towards the end of the year were just very, very tired. I mean, 2020, Ian's already called out and spoken eloquently. It's the toughest year that any of us are going to have to face, and hopefully 21 will be a wee bit easier. So I think towards the end of the year, we were just, exhausted with the various changes. I was actually quite proud of how the industry reacted from a claims point of view. If you said to me this time last year, can you run a motor claims operation of 400 people with 90% working from home, I'd say no chance, it's never going to work. And it did. And at RSA, we went from pretty much a standing start with people not having laptops to having them working from home, and managed with that within about 4 to 6 weeks of lockdown. And since then have pushed through and delivered some good results. Yes, helped a little bit by frequency. So frequency for us is around about 65%. But I think the industry did do really well in some very, very difficult circumstances. And as I said at the start, I think just towards the end of the year, I think it just was a little quieter. As we move into the latest lockdown, walking around Manchester, I've got to be honest, the roads don't seem that quiet, certainly not compared to lockdown 2. There's still enough people driving around. It's Manchester in January. It's not sunny as it will be in Peterborough or Essex, anything like that. It's cold and wet. It's damp. I think that does make people use their vehicles more than anything else. We can probably expect some tighter restrictions coming as well. I think the government will probably have to do that with the way that the rates are going, which will have a knock-on effect again for motor frequency. But thinking positively, I think from a motor claims operation, we're able to provide a much more flexible approach now for our employees and from the staff, and I think we reacted pretty well. I think that stands in good stead for the future.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Peter. And Gary, from your side, how are you seeing the world, I suppose, specifically as we kind of move into 2021 and the impact of lockdown 3.0?
Yeah, I guess pretty boring, Mark, but echo the sentiments of the guys. Actually, 2020, what a tough year for everyone. Really proud of how we responded as a business, and so many others, I'm sure, would echo that about their own businesses as well. I think, if I just reflect on our numbers profile through 2020 and what's happened on 2021, so taking an assumed 100% volume pre-COVID and not factoring any new business at all, that dropped down to 25% in April in lockdown 1, picked up over August, September, October to an average of about 68%, so really getting back to some decent levels. Lockdown 2 knocked that down again, 58%. And then December, a spike back up to 68%. And I think we were talking earlier, and the guys will share this, that first week of January, there wasn't much change from that December volume. Actually, it was relatively consistent. What we have seen over the last week is a drop-off in that. And actually, I think quite surprisingly and refreshingly for me, only at the moment to 55% of pre-COVID volume. And I think my own personal expectation was that it might drop below 50%. And not get anywhere near where we were last April, but certainly the sort of harshest levels that we've seen post that so far. But we've not seen that yet. I think Peter touched on a really good point that the weather is playing a factor in that. People, it's cold, it's wet, it's dark after work. People don't necessarily want to walk to their local shop to pick up milk, so they're using the car a lot more. And just rhetorically, the same here as in Manchester, the roads are busier. There's no doubt about that. Cars are still whizzing around everywhere, so that's good to see. I think the challenge has been throughout this, Mark, and continues to be that there is just no consistency to this. And I think if we could all sit here now and say that volume would be 65% for the next 6 months, we could do operational models around that, revenue models around that, and make sure that we are well prepared. The difficulty is that that's just never happened. Consistent changes in government policy based upon COVID numbers, fluctuations, lockdowns, and it's just made it incredibly difficult to predict what's going to happen next. So you always feel like you're on the back foot in terms of preparations as a business trying to respond to that, and it creates some real challenges for the operational staff as well. I think the final thing to say, and again, I think the guys alluded to it, is that we've changed so much over the last year for us as Innovation Group as a business in the way that we operate, homework in the systems and technology that we use. And there have been some really valuable lessons that we've learned out of that as well. I think, the remote technology has been fantastic. I sort of reflect now on the amount of time I've wasted going to see, having meetings in person that maybe only lasted an hour, 30 minutes, and the travel time that's associated with that. I don't think we'll ever return to that now. And we've got flexible ways of working that can accommodate people with different scenarios and situations at home, which I think we're going to be able to keep hold of and maintain forever, which is some great news.
Great stuff. Thanks, Gary. Really appreciate that, and really interesting in terms of the numbers and the volumes we're seeing. Ian, I'm going to come back to you in a moment, because obviously around the planning and forecasting stuff, we touched upon it quite heavily when you were previously on last year. But I just want to, again, grab a little bit of sentiment from those tuned in. So business focus. So what is the key area of business focus currently for yourself? Now, it probably is all of those, but if there's one that you could kind of pluck out and say, yep, at the moment, that's the one I'm really looking at, focusing on right now. If we can just have a little vote there, see what's going on. And I know one of those, or a couple of those, are certainly a favourite of yours, Ian, and we spoke about it. Best case, worst case, and what do we say? Medium case scenarios we spoke of last year. So, and I know you dusted down the notes from your the last time you were on. So,
yeah.
All right. So just a couple more seconds. Votes are still coming in. All right, so let's end the polling. Let's share the results there. So claims volumes, 30% is key. Obviously, that kind of drives essentially everything within this industry. Cash flows, 17. Partnerships, 16%. So some quite close ones there. People management, 15%, absolutely. Forecasting, 14%. So touches upon, obviously, what Gary's just said. So, Ian, I'll come across to you then. So what can we all do to stay on top of business in general right now? And I know it's, as I say, one of your favourite subjects.
I think one of the things that we are this year against last year is that last year it was all unknown to us. COVID-19 was completely uncharted territory. We didn't know our way through it. So I think what we've got to do is to take what we've learned last year and apply that into our forecasting going forward. I agree claims volumes are important, but what kills a business is cash flow. So I think there's a correlation between claims volumes and cash flow and forecasting, but fundamentally, maintaining a strong balance sheet is the critical thing to do. But learn, we didn't know what we were facing last year, and we were all very unsure, apprehensive, nervous, maybe scared, if I'm being totally honest. But I think we've got some good experience now of COVID-19, the kind of the helter-skelter that the route we follow through it, having a couple of lockdowns, which we hadn't planned for, understanding furlough, understanding business rate relief, and also planning. So I think for me, it's the most important thing is to ensure that you have, you maintain a strong cash position. I think in 2021, we're going into 2021 with slightly depleted reserves that we've spent in 2020. So if we get hit with COVID in 2021 as hard as 2020, we're in less of a financially strong position than we were in 2019 going into 2020. So this is a second wave of dealing with COVID-19, but with slightly depleted reserves. And this is my concern, and I'm hearing that across other industries as well, is that they've spent a lot of their war chest in maintaining survival during 2020, and now they're going into 2021 on the assumption that COVID would probably be gone by 2021, and they're now facing 2021 with depleted reserves. So for me, the main focus is about cash flow and maintaining that cash position, and that's about managing your furlough, whether it's temporary furlough or permanent furlough, is managing your debt, and equally looking at claims volumes, because having less volume can also assist, because you can then take the support from the government to maintain your cash position. But ultimately, everything comes down to about maintaining that balance sheet strength. That's the critical thing. So that would be but I think let's use our experience of what we've had from last year, because we've learned lots, all of us, the whole industry have learned. Let's take that learning and then apply that knowledge now and experience in actually improving how we forecast and how we plan our future.
Great stuff. Thanks, Ian. And then Peter, across to you from an insurer's perspective. Obviously, you can only talk on RSA's behalf, but again, same thing. How do you kind of, work with the supply chain, to ensure that it is all going in the right direction, essentially, despite all the challenges that are around us?
It's important that we support the supply chain, obviously, and we've got very good relationships with our suppliers. Ian actually is one, so I'd have to say that today. But we have regular feedback and regular conversations around volume, and it's important that we understand the challenges that the guys are facing, because that can help us manage the message with customers, which for us as the insurer is ultimately our key focus. When we're looking at the challenges that we're going to face as a business this year, I was looking at the poll you put through there. Claims volumes obviously is important for us, but people management, I think you got 15% on the poll. Being selfish as somebody who looks after a big claims operation, how we manage people, how we learn from 2020 is really important. Managing people remotely is different from managing people face to face. Insurance, since I've been in it, has always been a people business. I think it will always be a people business. It's built on trust, and getting back to having face-to-face interactions, I think is really, really important, not only within the claims operation, but also with the wider supply chain. I agree with Gary that we don't need to go back to travelling from Manchester to London for a half-hour meeting, for sure. But having regular interaction, I think, is really, really important to us. The claims department itself, you can't really put a value on what you're losing by handlers not listening to each other in a live sort of call centre environment, not being able to ask quickly, I've got this situation here, what would you do with it? You can manage it remotely, but it's just not as real time. And, one of the opportunities I think we have this year is if lockdown continues or if it happens again, I think how we use that time to support the people, to make them the best claims handler they can be, to ultimately then drive the best result for the customer. That's really a key focus for us. Underpinning though, all of that is our relationship with the supply chain, for sure. But I think for us as an insurance industry, and for us as a claims department, managing the people is probably our number one priority right now, but ultimately to drive that great customer experience.
Great stuff. Thanks, Peter. And across to you, Gary, you've talked about the volumes, and obviously volumes was kind of top of the list there that we saw. But, you'd be in agreement with everything that we saw there, that people were kind of casting their votes on cash flows, forecasting, all these things. You've already mentioned how kind of difficult it is to do in an unknown environment. But, what would your kind of, to your supply chain, how are you working with them to kind of navigate your way through it, I suppose?
Yeah, I think, I saw the list that you popped up, Mark, and I would have really struggled to select one from that, actually, because they were all quite important and all sort of pretty much interdependent of each other as well. So a really difficult choice. I do think the starting point for us is around volume, because, in a sort of trickle-down economic way, that's how we project revenue, resource requirement for supply chain as well. So it does begin there for us, but there's so many different sorts of challenges, and Peter touched on people management, which I'm massive on, because one of the key concerns for me, as a person, is that without this office face-to-face interaction, you actually just become a staff member as opposed to a person and a personality that attaches to that. You're someone that produces X amount of work per day instead of who you are as an individual. And I think that's a concern for everyone going forward as to how you maintain those personal relationships that you've got within your workplace. I think one of the challenges for us, Mark, as well, as we're not just a repairer, we are a claims management company, is the balance of work in progress as well. So we handle a lot of third-party claims as well on the defence side, and those very often come a little bit later down the line. So where we are getting a reduction in F&O now, we may see a reduction in third-party claims 2 to 3 months further down the line. The availability of government support schemes might not be there at that point. And so that is a concern for us about how we balance, an existing work in progress book with the challenges that are going to come further down the line in terms of number reduction there as well. And I'm sure if there's any lawyers in the audience today, they would share that, because they feel the pain even further down the line than we do on occasion. So there's lots for us to consider there. I think one of the key things that we've learned last year, and I'm sure everyone would agree with this, and those that have struggled, I think, have really struggled with this, is to be nimble as much as possible. We are a large company, but we're not so large that making big changes in business direction is impossible for us. And we've had that flexibility, which has allowed us to sort of diversify the way that we've worked to be able to survive around this. And I saw on the Q&A someone popped in there around diversifying the products that you offer. I completely agree with that. If you are reliant upon a single stream of revenue and that has dried up, you are going to struggle. It's being reliant upon oxygen ultimately. Can you find other ways to breathe in those sorts of circumstances? So we've really had to be flexible over the last year and look at the way that we navigate this difficult period, the way that we support our supply chain partners through that as well, and help them and find different ways to survive and ultimately thrive coming out of this.
Great stuff. Great words of advice. And thanks for picking up on one of the questions there. We'll come back to the others coming in there at the moment. So again, any questions that you've got, fire them away in the Q&A panel. One thing that we specifically wanted to catch up on, or certainly focus on, is Brexit. It was kind of an unknown as we signed off in December, and none of us are Brexit experts that I know of, unless anyone's got any hidden talent anywhere. But we've been catching up with various people from the sector, speaking to various people. Brexit itself, and I'm going to speak on behalf of others that I've spoken to. You guys can correct me and jump in, but it doesn't seem to have had that much of a major impact thus far. We got a deal. There's certainly some implications in terms of paperwork, which is perhaps causing more logistics challenges, arguably, or timescales. But there doesn't seem to be a major issue at the moment. The biggest challenge seems to be in terms of COVID-19 and its impact, i.e. Numbers of staff, social distancing. The docks are getting things in, but they're kind of being stockpiled a little bit at the moment. So there's an awful lot of challenges there. The price of containers is also kind of a bit of a free-for-all at the moment, or has been. But the good news being, there doesn't seem to be any major challenges as yet, and the slowing down, if you like, of claims volumes, and again, this is hearsay, this is what I'm being fed, has almost sort of played into the hands that, you know, there should be no problems moving ahead. So again, any ideas, thoughts on that, Gary? You know, have you got any comments on that? You've spoken to people, heard from people, supply chain, etc.
Yeah, we had some chat. I think the same as you, Mark, the effect thus far has been limited. I do think that there's an inevitability of a lag there, that any impact will be felt within the coming weeks, and that's what we're preparing for. In addition to some red tape and documentation at ports, the ports have also been awfully affected by COVID outbreaks as well. So there's been a lack of personnel there, which is just slowing everything down. We've also got reduced volumes at the moment, which means that any potential impact is mitigated somewhat because there's not the demand there. However, speaking to our engineering team on this earlier, I do think that they're expecting to see some consequence of this over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Again, which, what percentage of that is because of Brexit itself, or what percentage is because of COVID issues within the ports are tough to determine. All I will say, Mark, is that, regardless of anyone's politics, I think that the deal is obviously great news for us as an industry. It removes a lot of doubt and provides some clarity over what will happen in the future. So I think that that's great. But at the moment, I think for us, no direct impact. We are expecting it over the next couple of weeks. We'll keep a watching brief to see what happens.
Great stuff. Thanks, Gary. And Peter, from your perspective, from an RSA perspective, have you looked into this in sort of great depth, and what have you sort of found out or still seeing?
I mean, at the moment, we're not really seeing an impact. I think you're going to see some trouble getting parts in, and Ian will be in a much better position than me to speak about some of the challenges that we'll face, which will probably mean that we look more to green parts. So there's a customer journey there. Some customers like them, some customers don't. Environmentally, there's clearly a benefit there. But you can see with any sort of challenge, I always think, well, what's the opportunity likely to be? So I think with Brexit, if you're going to see the challenge on parts getting in the UK, we'll be looking at using, I think, green parts more. I know GS have released some announcements on that very recently, and they do a lot of good work on that kind of thing. I suspect the industry will look at that. And Brexit may well be sort of the conduit, if you like, of not forcing our hand, but just encouraging to look at that opportunity. But right now, as it stands, no, it's just too early for us. And I think you've already called out COVID has probably masked any real challenge that we face anyway.
Yeah. And Ian, anything different from your perspective where you sit?
No, I agree on Gary and Peter's spot. I mean, you have to look at it from a commercial entity. The vehicle manufacturers, the UK is a treasure island for the vehicle manufacturers, okay, is my humble view. It's a huge profit center for them. We love buying German brand vehicles and subsequently collision and parts. So I think if the OEMs were to have interrupted supply chain into the UK, then what you would see is the aftermarket grow. So I don't think the OEMs want to allow the aftermarket to gain market share in what is their treasure island. So I think the OEMs will do all they can to protect and oversupply into the market. So I don't think supply will be a problem. I think the cost of parts inflation will be a problem. I think the administration, the paperwork that Gary was alluding to at the ports, Whether that be COVID or Brexit, I think that's going to add additional costs to it. If the shipping containers are going up by sixfold from the Far East, and if that's true, then ultimately that will be reflected in the unit price. But I can't see that the OEMs, the vehicle manufacturers, will allow interrupted supply, because what will happen is that the purchasing habits of body shops and mechanical repair shops is to go and buy aftermarket. So I don't think they want to lose their OE penetration in the UK. So I think that's the one thing they'll want to hang on to. So I think that would be absolutely a focus of theirs. So I don't really see that supply will be a problem. I do have concerns around parts price inflation and inflationary supply. At the moment, I think, to Gary's point, when you look at COVID, it's the impact of PPE and the cost of PPE and all that additional cost at the moment that seem to be a major cost base for us, as opposed to the parts supply. Certainly, through Brexit. But Gary's point's right. It's the timing so bad because we've gone with Brexit and COVID at the same time. So the whole thing's mixed up. So it's difficult to actually split it out and say, well, actually that's as a result of COVID and this is as a result of Brexit. I think it's kind of a mixed bag, if I'm honest. And I think, Gary's point's right that, there's inefficiency built in. I mean, one of the questions on there talks about the impact of COVID on our technicians. So if I have a technician that's off work for 2 weeks because of self-isolation, that probably cost me £10,000 in sales that I lose. Yes, their wages are covered because of COVID and furlough support, but I lose 10 grand in sales.
Yeah,
that's the real thing. That's where the pain comes from. So, but I can't see that the OEMs will allow on Brexit the aftermarket to steal their market share.
It's a great point, Ian, actually, because the manufacturers have been so aggressive in lobbying governments in Europe to get this deal done. They've wanted it so much that to believe that they will just let this fail now that we've got a deal or impact the supply chain at all is probably quite naive, and they're going to do everything they can to maintain penetration in what's such a big market for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
They call it Treasure Island for a reason. Yeah.
Treasure Island, yeah.
I like that. We're going to coin that phrase. Right, just again, we're rapidly moving along in time-wise. So I just want to have a little look forward to 2021. Again, another little poll coming your way. We did cast this same poll just at the beginning of December, so it'll be interesting to compare results. But how confident are you in a business capacity looking ahead to 2021? Very confident, cautiously confident, less confident than last year, not confident at all. Get those votes in, and then we'll just round things off for the conversation for today. It's been a fascinating catch up. And again, we'll be rolling bi-weekly with the webinars. So continue to join us as we document things throughout the year. Okay, so votes, last couple coming in. All right, let's finish on the good news then. So 82% confident. Well, that's not to say that the 18% aren't confident, but they're a bit less confident than last year. So that's all good news. Let's stop that. And so, Ian, key themes for 2021 from your perspective?
Key themes are trading conditions will remain tough. But I think, I certainly would ask the industry to reopen the support that they've provided in 2020 around COVID support. A number of key insurers have been instrumental in helping us and helping the industry. So I would ask that be continued through 2021 to ensure sustainability of our industry. But I think trading conditions will remain tough. I think we have to take the learnings from last year and use those learnings to ensure that we remain cautiously confident throughout this year. But I think agility, I think, Gary, you mentioned it, agility is key. We have to move fast and we have to move quickly. And sometimes we delay decisions and that can become costly for us. So it's about being agile, but it's equally as well, it's about asking for support and communicating correctly. So yeah, that's the one thing that we could achieve this year, which is the industry continues its support, the insurance industry continues its support for the collision repair industry, that would be a fantastic thing.
Right. And across to you then, Peter. What would your response to it? No.
Sorry, Peter, I wasn't there. That was an Ian Pugh version, by the way, guys. You said this is all personal and in my opinion. It's nothing to do with
from that perspective, Peter, there is a question that's come in as well in terms of, SLAs and cycle time, CSIs, etc. Key themes from an insurer perspective in this kind of claims environment we're in, really.
Oh yeah, look, the industry has to support the repair network, and that will continue. I've no doubt about that. In terms of the SLA question, which I did see, I think that's a lot of that is about customer communication. To be quite honest, I think if you're on a case-by-case basis, the man on the street is going to understand why it's going to take his car longer to get repaired today, and we can manage that as a business, and we can any penalties that might be in the contract, we can manage that in a proper and a consistent way. It's about, for me, that is just purely about communication with the end user. So I think that is something that we can and should manage. Key things for us, the CLA on the injury side will come through. The industry needs to pass on £35 worth of savings onto the end user. At the same time, I think Ian's articulated very well why we'd expect to see AD and PD costs going up. And, at the end of the day, the insurance industry will always rate its premium based on how much it's spending in claims. So from us, from a communication point of view, the industry needs to make sure it does a very good job in explaining to customers why they pay what they pay for their premium. Not something that perhaps we've got a track record of being very transparent on, but something that we certainly need to look to improve. And that's going to be a key theme for us. And the last thing I'm going to say one more time, it's about people training. It's about looking after people. It's about people's well-being, and it's about building on the flexibility that we were able to do this year.
Great words, Peter. Great words. And Gary, final say from you. Again, the same thing. Key themes from your perspective.
I think firstly, just how important the repairers are to everything that we do. They deliver what everyone sells and promises ultimately, and there's nothing like the threat of some of your supply chain closing or some indeed closing down to make me realise just how much you need those guys. I don't know about anyone else, but I've realised how important barbers are over the last few months, and it's the same sort of theme actually to realise the importance of these guys. I think something else I just wanted to mention, Mark, as well. I'm not saying it's the most important thing, but technology for me has really just the demand for it has increased exponentially over the last year or so. I go back 3 or 4 years and I was responding to tenders, and technology was something that was put in an RFP that someone wanted to use as a tick box exercise, but I don't think it was focused on. Now it drives everything. People want as much remoteness as possible. They want self-service technology for their customers and consumers. They want API interactions with their mobile applications, etc. And feel like over the last year, coupled with what's happened with COVID, there has been such a surge in demand for modernisation of the claims and repair process as it pertains to consumers in particular. And I would expect that to continue to increase over 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, great stuff. And again, key theme to stem out of last year, technology and people, 2 recurring themes throughout the course of the year, and undoubtedly moving ahead, it will be very much the same. So a huge thank you, obviously, to you guys. We'll come back to you in a second. Corporate partners and partners, BASF, BMS, CAPS, Opart, Emacs, Integral, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Mercer, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, S&G Response, and Sherwin-Williams Automotive Finishes, as well as, of course, our partners, Aztec, the Green Parts Specialists, Indasa, Prasco, and the Innovation Group. Great conversation, 45 minutes. Goodness me, that has absolutely flown by. We could have done an hour and 45 today, so maybe we'll be looking to reverse things. But big thank you to Ian. Hope you get well soon, better soon. Keep us posted, obviously. The industry needs to know. Peter, thank you very much for joining us, giving us a view from a vantage from an insurer's perspective, sorry. And Gary, again, likewise, thanks for joining us once again. Huge thank you to everyone for joining us. Drop some messages in the chat. It's great to hear how you found it. Any thoughts, anything that you want to share with us, please leave it there. Send me direct emails, whatever it takes. CAPS have also said if you want the weekly data shared, they're quite happy to do that. But again, drop some notes, drop some messages messages in the panel, and we'll get that sorted with Kev at CAPS. Join the ARC360 LinkedIn group, where we'll keep you posted on all the latest information and everything to STEM through us. We will see you on webinar duty in a couple of weeks. We'll have a podcast out next week. And in the meantime, stay safe, everybody, and take good care of yourselves. Take care, all.
Bye.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.